going through this struggle multiple times was one of the things that led me to get bored with debugging code. You get super excited by help debugging people and then realizing that was inflicting help, not offering it.
So I think that there's a curiosity and empathy that turns us outward, that actually gives us the strength to start solving problems that affect us in a wider sense.
This is the Uncommon Leadership Roundtable, where we bring smart people together to discuss hard topics in a fun way. And today our topic is the many connections between joy and resilience, both so important in these overwhelmingly changeful times. I am your host, Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams. And joining me today are Tim Ottinger, who is a longtime extreme programming, lean, agile delivery expert and author. And I hear that he is the person to go to if you want to learn test-driven development.
I am
Tim,
one of the few.
one of the people. Okay. What most often brings you joy, Tim?
Oh, every time I learn fun things, and most things I learn are fun. And those are immediate joy. And then when I learn things that are true but are not fun, that's joy a little later on. It takes a while to sink in. But mostly in learning and in working with people, to be able to serve others is, I think, an underrated joy.
Indeed.
And of course, anytime you're out in the woods in Scotland is a beautiful, joyous time.
I am all for that. Thank you, Tim. And we also have Portia Tung, who is the play alchemist, helping visionary leaders and teams transform their culture through the science and power of play. Portia has discovered the secret source to high-performing and healthy systems she calls advanced systemic intelligence, also known as play alchemy. She is the creator of the Play Genius Quiz, the first instrument to measure play intelligence, author of The Dream Team Nightmare, an agile choose-your-own-adventure novel. Portia also loves playing the ukulele and making the seemingly impossible come true. Portia, what most often brings you joy?
Well, they say that the best puddings are to be tasted. So I thought I'd share that with you if that's okay. So if you feel free and go ahead and stand up if you fancy, or you can stay seated, but I shall stand. So it's entirely up to you. And I invite your listeners to also take part. Is that okay?
Let's do it.
For a few moments of fun. So they say that a true follower is one who knows when to follow, but really that's also what a true leader is. So maybe what we can do is just go ahead and put our hands up in front of us and just give our wrists a little wrist roll. Lovely. And do it one way and then the other, because according to one physicist, it helps us mitigate the terror of the uncertainty in the universe when we have some form of symmetry in our bodies. And then maybe we can do some gentle neck roll. So imagine your nose is a crayon, tip of a crayon, and just kind of do some gentle rolls. There should be no pain, possibly the odd bit of clicking or squirting, depending on your age bracket and your fitness. And then go the other way, but there should be no pain. It's the heaviest bit of your head. There we go. And then the last bit, I know it's not quite Friday night yet, but let's just put our hands on our hips and we'll do a little bit of a hip swirl. Oh, this comes very naturally to many of us. I hope that your listeners, your viewers will also join us in this. And the other way, of course, in honor of symmetry and beauty and predictability. So maybe this is our chance to scare the neighbors or someone else in your house. It might be a non-human animal like a cat. So hands up in the air, and when you're ready, follow me. Oh, you're welcome to unmute yourselves, by the way, lovelies. Okay, you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. I can't hear you. Our head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Bravo. Now, if you're a little bit gutted, because you missed out on that endorphin hit, here's your second chance, and we'll do it as quick as you can. Are you ready? And you can do it in your mind if you like, or in your heart, as quick as you can. 1, 2, 3, go. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Bravo! And that's what brings me a great deal of joy. I've done this at Cambridge and Churchill College. I've done this in the MIT building in London and all sorts of weird and wonderful places. And of course, in Washington, DC at Agile 2019 as well. And I've found that thanks to the wisdom of children, this is one of the quickest ways of really recalibrating our bodies, as well as to really tune into whether or not we know where our eyes are relative to where our toes are, when sometimes we're just having that kind of discombobulated day. So that's me, how I have joy. Thank you, Michael. Back to you.
Thank you, Portia. Also joining us today is Jeff Langer, who loves software development and has been doing it since 1980. He's written a handful of books on it, including some of Clean Code. Look for a new edition of that in the near future. Jeff, what most often brings you joy?
Well, I was going to say something else, but I realized there's a lot of joy in picking up Lynn on the floor when you're doing head, shoulders, knees, and toes. So thank you for that, Portia. Yeah, so mostly I get joy out of music. So there's this sitting here for whenever I get a little stressed out at work, I'll just mute and just start kind of playing along with things. Nobody ever has to see me doing it either, since we're off camera on my current gig most of the time. I also love learning as well as Tim, but maybe I've decided I actually get far more joy in teaching others. I actually had a recent chance to teach class in it, test-driven development, since Tim mentions that, and realized really enjoyed it. It just came out naturally, even though I hadn't touched this class in 2 or 3 years. So get a lot of kicks out of just helping others and teaching others.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, we have Matthew Carlson, who is the founder of Applied Principles Consulting, LLC, where he helps organizations design systems that work the way people actually do. That is so needed. Matthew, what most often brings you joy?
I think for me, one of the things that really consistently brings me joy is having that moment after you attack a hard problem and have banged your head against the wall a few times and have, struggled with it a little bit, and then have that release of actually having the grit to get past it, and the finding joy in doing hard things. I think that actually really is where I find a lot. So
Love it. Thank you. And next we have Melissa Boyle, who has been working in the tech industry for over 2 decades and is currently the global CTO for LexisNexis Intellectual Property. She enjoys spending time with her husband and dog, Chief, and traveling as much as possible all over the world. Melissa, what most often brings you joy?
Yeah, thank you. So I did put my husband first in that introduction. However, my dog is probably usually the one that gets top billing. And so one of the things that brings me joy, I'm going to share a little peek of him if I can. Hopefully he's sleeping right here in my office. So he's had a rough day of napping and walking and snoring and playing with his toys. He often brings me a lot of joy in all of these difficult days of work or something stressful going on. Just knowing that he's like right there and peaceful and calm brings me a lot of joy. In my, in work, I would say really joy for me is mentoring and coaching folks and really helping them to realize their potential. It's really great to be able to push folks and see potential that they don't see in themselves. And then when that light bulb goes off for them they kind of look back and are like, wow, I was able to do that. And so that brings me a lot of joy to be able to see all of that happen for folks. So yeah.
Thank you. And I am the uncommon hero, not a fixer, because you are not broken. I am a guide and a partner, journeying alongside tech leaders as we uncover the invisible dynamics that block quality, stall change, and quietly drain energy from their teams. These aren't process problems, they are culture problems, subtle, systemic, and deeply human. We don't just solve these, we unlock the heroic leadership within you and your team, and often recover parts of yourselves that may have gotten a little lost along the way. I started out debugging people, then I started out debugging code, then I debugged people, and now I help people debug themselves, because the most powerful upgrade isn't in your tech stack, it is in you. So to kick us off, Tim, joy and resilience, how do they fit together for you? And where do they maybe not match up?
Well, I think that, of course, when you reach times that require a lot of resilience, sometimes it's hard to reach for the joy. Things have happened that we would not have chosen for ourselves or for our friends. And that's just, part of life. Have you ever read an adventure book where they planned it all out and that everything went exactly to plan and it ended fine? That would be a lousy adventure book, right? So at some point we have to recognize, this is an adventure and things do go south and sideways sometimes. But, you've got to keep the sense of adventure alive in it when it goes, what is the best I can do with where I am? And when I can switch from woe is me to, okay, here we are, then that's a time that suddenly I can start to take joy in my progress, in what they call profluence. If you listen to Mike Hill, profluence is a literary term, and it's the sense of the plot moving forward. And when things are moving forward, you get a sense of joy and adventure with it. But when things are stopped, when you lack profluence, then it's harder to be resilient. So I think the biggest thing I could recommend for people is, watch your sense of profluence, see where you are. How do we move forward from this position? We can't choose where we start, but where's the adventure going to go next?
Where should the adventure go next, Melissa?
Yeah, I think, for me, joy and resilience, as I think about the things that bring me joy, with mentoring and coaching folks, sometimes, right, always people are probably the hardest to change, or to encourage, or to, give them guidance. And so I think, having resilience to help, a longer journey, and to help folks when they've, fallen down, or, fallen backwards, or, whatever the case may be. I think that's where it kind of connects for me, is trying to realize that the end of this journey brings me that joy, and will bring them joy as well, as they look back. But I think having some resilience at times to help folks through that journey, is important. So.
Jeff, as you've been writing clean code bits and pieces, you've probably run into a lot of resilience and joy blockers. What helps you connect those, and how do you bring it out for the people who read what you write?
Wow. Okay, there's a question. Not really sure how to begin answering that. How do I connect joy and resilience? I don't know. Tim, go ahead. Go ahead and interrupt. That'll help me think a little.
Let me give you a minute to think. So, by the way, Jeff is a serial author. He has written, I don't know how many books now.
5 and some have
5 or 6. So we were co-authors of Agile in a Flash and co-authors of Clean Code. And he's got a whole bunch of books with it's just one name on the front, and it's Jeff Langer. And the TDD for Java, the number of really, really well-respected books. So I know for a fact he gets a kick when people actually read what he writes.
Yeah, that's even better when, you know, people pay to read what I write too.
And when they understand it.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's the goal, right? Is to help. I mean, that's the joy in writing. It's really that you are trying to find a way to make things accessible to people. So just as a brief touch on joy and resilience, I did write a book. It's called Pragmatic Unit Testing. It's like the second edition it was in 2015 of the original Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas book from like 2003. And they're like, okay, rewrite this book. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I even agree with the way it's presented. It's not really test-driven development. It's after the fact unit testing. So my thought was, let me do the best I can with it. And obviously it wasn't really as best as it could have been, because I got some comments like, yeah, we're not sure what you're trying to do in this book. So the joy was I did get a chance to come back and have another stab at it, almost 10 years later. Was allowed to write a third edition, rewrite it to try to make it as engaging as possible and accessible as possible. And feedback's good. Book sales are down, so there's another bit of thing that you have to have resilience against. Is how do we survive as writers in this climate? So there's all these things that kind of come back and forth as a writer. You get blocked at times. You get things out there that people aren't happy with. The joy is in finding the little bits of feedback that you get from people that suggest they are actually getting value out of. People are really excited with the way you presented things, how you help them understand or learn things.
Matthew, what helps you find all those little bits of joy in the midst of despondency and people not reading what you write?
Well, one, finding the people who do is always nice, and having the conversations and having this conversation sort of thing. But also, I really do. I connect in a lot of ways, and thank you for having this conversation, because it really made me realize that I connect joy and resilience as kind of two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. That if something is too easy, if there's nothing to be resilient about, then there's not nearly as much to celebrate when it does go right. If our lives were all perfect, if our lives were, and had nothing for us to recover from any of that, then I don't know that we would actually feel the great amount of joy when it does happen. And so, every once in a blue moon, when somebody does actually read something I write, I'm overjoyed, right? It's this amazing thing that we get to have this conversation. And so, yeah, I guess I'm really thinking about the connection that way. And how do I find those things? I don't actually find it all that hard in daily life to find challenges. And so instead, I look for, okay, cool, how can we get the joy out of overcoming those challenges?
It's pretty crazy that the way our physical muscles grow is by breaking them. That's the only way to make them stronger. And I find the same is true for our other less tangible muscles as well. As if all we ever experience is joy, we don't realize how awesome we have it. And it's the downtimes that help us realize how amazing the rest of the time is. Portia, as you are helping people realize how important play is and how it's the answer to every single of their problems, there's probably a lot of pushback at first, because most people aren't looking around saying, I don't think there's enough play around here. We need someone to help us get better at that. What helps you bring that joyfulness into the resilience to keep showing up every day, talking to these leaders and people who don't understand the importance of it, and in fact may be completely convinced that play is the opposite of what should happen in a business.
Yeah, I think those are great insights. Thank you, Michael. One of the top tips for myself, and also with alumni of the School of Play, and just playing with very playful adults, is the fact that in spite of having this great brain set, including the prefrontal cortex, we're not really so clever, because if I asked you to think about your earliest memory of play, let's just take a moment, just on your own, conjure up it doesn't have to be the earliest, but it could be an early memory of play, like traveling back in a time machine and just taking a moment to savor that and really capture what that scene is, or what that favorite truck or toy car or Lego build or a stuffed toy, what instrument, whatever that is, and then to compare how it feels before and after conjuring that memory. Our brains can't tell the difference. So actually, for me, one of the things I've discovered is that to kind of cultivate joy and to nurture resilience is a lot about looking back in our treasure box and looking for those memories. And so very often these days, when things are a little bit quieter but hectic on the outside, I think about some of my favorite achievements as a human being. And one of those things was I happened to have got selected to be a head girl at school. I don't know, that must be something similar in America and elsewhere. And I was just telling my dad before this call, because I was catching up with him, and I said, you know what, Dad? It wasn't about the title for me. And I said, I didn't care about the power. I just wanted to have the freedom to support all the girls at this girls' school I was at. And it taught me about representing something more than my own interest. And suddenly I felt like, okay, there is this importance of how I behave and all this, but it was never shame-based. It was more about encouragement. And that taught me more about leadership, to be honest, as in what you would benefit doing for the whole system, rather than in the 25 years I've observed it in large corporates and other different companies, right? And I think that's the key thing. When you sort of remember where you come from and all the goodies, then we can also rummage in that bag and find all the tools we need to get joy from, and also resilience. And as for encouraging adults to play, one of my earliest pieces of discovery was I got to hang out with really playful adults. So to be clear, I started off when I had my newborn some years ago now, over a decade ago. I realized holding this new baby that I didn't know how to play. In spite of having come up with a set of games, Creative Commons, Agile conferences, I was known for this. But I was holding my little baby and I thought, oh dear, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to, cast her into a curse of playlist childhood, because terrible things happen. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to set off on this journey, find the tools, and reclaim play for myself. And really, this is what's motivated me to do that. And as a result, I pay special attention. And I ended up going to this wonderful conference called Counterplay in Denmark some years ago. And as I observed these adults really talking about societal change and play, and this is after a Friday night's, worth of beers and chat, and on Saturday morning they're talking about how do we bring a more playful world, into existence so we have more peace and all that. I was like, there are some core attributes here. What are they? So did you know playful adults are resourceful, responsible, respectful, resilient, and the fifth R is real, as in authentic, safely and truly authentic, like the Velveteen Rabbit. So when I had these 5 R's, I was like, no way, nobody, or rarely do we associate these 5 R's with children. And my daughter was about 4 years old at the time. So a bit like Sherlock Holmes, I used it as a magnifying glass to observe her. And lo and behold, there she was, busy being resilient when someone had snaffled her toy without permission, of course, because that's what children do. And then I'd watch her friends too. And it was just this most beautiful thing. And that led me to conclude, or at least a working hypothesis, that this is innate, these 5 R's. So what I do now is when I get invited into organizations or keynotes, when I talk about this work, it sort of settles in like a glitter jar, and it settles, and then somehow the truth hits home and the whole system relaxes. So very often managers will say to me, you came to give that talk a week ago. Like, my leadership team has changed just from that talk. The Tim has a little example there. And people, it just resonates with them because it feels true. And actually then everybody kind of starts emerging, embodying these things that they just needed permission or recognition for. Yeah, so a little bit of how I try to do it.
Thank you. Melissa, as CTO, part of your responsibility is helping all of your engineers, all of you, everyone interacting with your technologies to have that opening up experience and be able to do their work a little better for all the things that you bring into their life. How do you do that? How do you especially go back and remember what it was like when you were just starting out or didn't know how all this stuff worked to help those people come into this world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have some very fond memories of when I was starting out as an engineer and then a tech lead and kind of growing up through the ranks. And there was this feeling that I got when I was a tech lead at one of the companies years ago, too long ago, and we really embodied, XP practices at the time, which we didn't know they were XP practices because nobody told us that's what they were. But we had this culture of, grabbing our laptops and sitting in the hallway with each other and pair programming and just really creating this very open way of working. And that carried with me through a lot of the different companies that I've worked for. And some were open to that and others not so much, right? And so as I kind of grew up through the leadership ranks, I really tried to continue to ground myself in, if I ever get to be a CTO, what type of culture do I want to create? And what are the things that were important to me? And then also look at, who does that work for? Because my style doesn't work for everybody and my culture doesn't work for everybody. And so how do I create a team and empower that team to feel like they can also create their own culture within their teams? So I've kind of tried to do that through really being a bit hands off in comparison to maybe some of the leaders that I've worked for. It's important to me to trust and empower my teams. For those that are coming up through the, as new, maybe new folks out of college or technical schools, really giving them permission, right, to innovate or to try things out, to experiment and fail fast if that's what's going to happen, or succeed. And I think, when people know that they have that permission and it's okay, and they've, even if it didn't work out, it's like, okay, so you tried it. Great. Let's move on. Right. And I also think being very accessible. So one thing that I really like to do with my organization is I make a point to get to every office that that I have folks in. I make it a point to, whether it's have coffee with people or talk to them or have, one-on-ones or ping them on Teams, right? But being very accessible and them knowing that I'm also like a human, not this, this CTO that just sits somewhere and directs them to do things, but actually invites them into the process. And funny story, I was just in South Africa, and my team in South Africa told one of my direct reports that, wow, she's not a god. She's actually a human being, and she's actually down to earth and very real. And so they have this perception, right, that because you have a title and because you have, a position in a company, that there's, there might be a certain way that you behave or that that you show up. And I think what was really cool about that moment is they saw me show up as my authentic self. And so that really helps them to be their authentic self. And, through the years, it's been a struggle because, whether it's the way I dress or the way I do my hair or, I don't show up in, fancy business clothes, but and so there's perceptions about, well, are you the right fit for an executive level role? And I think what has been very good for me is just reminding myself to be authentic. And again, I think that carries through to my teams, and it really does help them to experiment and be authentic and try. And I get people like Tim to come help and work with us. So there's that too, which I'm so excited for.
I have a special advantage here because I've got to observe all of you at work. And so I've seen how you come to work and how you interact with your people. I was with Melissa. I mean, there's no question Melissa's a competent person who wields some power, and yet everybody comes to her. Everybody comes by to see how she's doing. Sometimes they bring her chocolate. Sometimes they come and take chocolate away. But she's there. And I've watched Portia give her master classes on cognitive science, and people they're reluctant to play. And then 3 or 4 days later, or 2 or 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, I really learned something from that. It's sneaky because she takes all this deep knowledge and slides it in as a game. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people talk about Matthew or Jeff, the things that they learned working with them just for a day or two here and there, that they suddenly, come to realize, well, and Matthew didn't, read his resume or anything, but his background is very much in organizational psychology. Is that correct? Is that the right term I should use? He has research. There we go. And he has a lot of awareness of how people work and how people work together that have allowed him to see things that sometimes are invisible to the rest of us. And so I've gotten these people because they are people who have a deep impact on the people around them all the time.
Have to buy you a beer the next time I'm in Scotland, Tim.
Well, I got a whole bunch of whiskey. If you want to stop by, we can always have a drink. There's some interesting stuff, though. I hear a recurring story in there, and I don't want to take over your job, Michael, but one of the recurring stories is you hear people talking about choosing who they're going to become in this. And I think that, when we talk about, okay, well, here we are now, what's going to happen next? Part of that whole idea is, who do we get to become next? Right. And if you were a small child, or you were a character in a hero book, well, it was foretold and your fortune was set and you're just meeting your destiny. Yeah, that's all nice. It makes a great Star Wars tale. But I think there's nothing more encouraging than knowing that you get to choose who you're going to be. Melissa gets to choose what kind of a CIO, CTO, whatever she is, CEO, she's going to be, right?
No, thank you.
I don't have all my titles yet. I still don't know mine quite. It's not firmly in yet, and I've, Jeff has reinvented himself a dozen times in the time I've known him, changing technical stacks and companies and approaches. And, you get to choose who you're going to be. If you lose track of that power, you'll think you're stuck, and you'll lose the plot, and you'll lose the adventure. So I think that's probably the joy, is in choosing who you're going to be next.
One of the hardest parts for me has been getting to points where I knew I wanted to be something next, and I didn't know what it was or how to find it. And going through this struggle multiple times was one of the things that led me to get bored with debugging code and get super excited by help debugging people, and then realizing that was inflicting help, not offering it. And so switching over to helping them debug themselves, because good grief, if I'd had someone to help me understand that myself, it would have been so much easier. And to get to help people do that for themselves, so they don't have to go through this years of pain and suffering and unhappiness, that is joy in itself. Matthew, I saw your hand raised.
I did, because you said something that reminded me of there's a friend of ours, I'm not sure how many people in here know him, probably everybody, Paul Tevis, who is both in the coaching community and the games community. He does a lot with cooperative games and those sorts of things. And something that he said that I remember that always stuck with me is frustration is something new wanting to emerge. And the idea along that whole resiliency thing, that's like, oh yeah, those times when I'm frustrated, those are the times when I really have a chance to look at, okay, what about it? This is frustrating. What new is wanting to emerge here? Where's the energy going? And I just kind of love that sentiment.
Jeff, what helps you find that resilience when the joy isn't there to help it out?
Yeah, I'm thinking at two levels. So first off, and I want to come back to this other point, which is often things are thrown at us and we can't control them. And I think for me, that's always been the most frustrating thing. So certainly COVID was one of those, and Tim mentioned reinvention, and thank you for the kind words there, Tim. Certainly I try to figure out, what does this mean for me? What's coming next? And so I rack my brain literally for a month or two trying to figure out what is the next chapter of my life. How am I going to survive in this world? So that begat a shift over to how do we do remote? Now we're seeing all of us being faced with, hey, maybe you don't have a job in a few years if AI takes over everything. So same kinds of things. So for me, it's been a little longer pondering, but to kind of answer your question a little more directly, I find that joy for me is not so much an emotion as it is having built habits that help support little incremental bits of joy throughout my day, throughout my life. So I mentioned the guitar. I mean, if I get frustrated, I'm sitting in a meeting and it's like, oh God, this is so tedious. I'll pick the guitar up and it'll just relax me. I'll toss my hands at a video game for 5 seconds, whatever it takes to just have moments where it's like I can kind of break from what's frustrating me, what's right in front of me now that I'm having a little struggle with. Obviously, you can't do that live, so I really appreciate being remote for a lot of things nowadays. But yeah, it is building these habits throughout the day, and I'll kind of cap it off with, I've been told, hey, depression runs in the family, Jeff. So I kind of long time ago said I'll never be that person who is depressed. But honestly, I suspect you can't always control that either. It's not all psychological. There's physiological issues going on. But one thing I was told, just as a simple, stupid tactic, I was told that, if you're not wanting to get up in the morning, you're probably depressed, right? So if you don't want to get up and face the challenges of the day. So I just kind of said, okay, one of my little stupid habits that I have when I wake up is jump out of bed and go race and run down the steps for the day, take the dog out, which wakes me the heck up. And it's just like, I know I've got to face the day regardless. If I start accepting that, hey, maybe I can get away with sleeping in for another 20 minutes or whatever. I used to be one of those who would set the alarm clock like 20 minutes forward after it went off, and then I'll get up then. And then I just decided it's a bad habit. It's a habit that will not give you joy in the long term. It's just delaying the stuff that you have to face, and then you have to have resilience for. So, a bunch of rambling thoughts, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Were you raising your hand or acknowledging, Portia?
Yeah, I'd like to share.
Yeah.
Sort of riffing off what Jeff said as well. What I found is that, of course, if we make room for all our feels, then it actually enlarges our capacity for joy. So, for example, as I listened to Jeff share his life hacks, one of the things he's done is actually remembered, as an RE hyphen, remembered that perhaps depression is part of all of our internal systems. And it's actually quite a useful alarm bell of sorts, right? Or a thermometer. And he's made room for it. And by accommodating it, he's developed this hack that actually keeps it at bay, I guess, like a hungry wolf. You make sure you feed it regular and then it won't gnaw at your ankles. So that's brilliant. And I wanted to just respond to Tim's sort of question challenge of who do we get to become? And for me, again, it's really interesting. Like this question of like, who's your hero and all this. And I've always found it challenging to answer. And for me, it's really about who do we get to become again? So, I turned 50 a couple of months ago, and I think I was making this return journey. It's like turning a huge ship around a couple of years before that. And I don't know if this resonates with you all and your listeners. But I find that now I'm reconnecting with folks like Rod Johnson, of Spring Source fame. And, he hired me for my second techie job. And I learned programming from him. I helped with the Spring framework before it was even a thing. And I remember the story for me here and the lesson is to work with great people. It's either capitals great or lowercase, it doesn't matter. And I met all of them at one of these great Java conferences. It's like Jürgen Höller, Adrian Collier, Rob Harrop, all of them. We're just there kind of drinking tea or whatever and chatting. And this penny drops in my mind. And I was like, just a clarifying question. You have never met face to face, and yet you don't argue about where you put your semicolon or how many white spaces you have before the end of line symbol and all of this. And they looked at me slowly. And this is the wonderful thing with hanging out with great people, right? They said, no. And I said, well, why don't you disagree? Because, the Perl community and everybody else argues about these things, and it's hard to form a community and a framework or whatever they want to produce. And they said, oh, we all read Rod's book and we all agreed. And then someone else piped up and they said, well, Jürgen eyeballs every single line of code that gets checked in. So about a month ago, I caught up with Rod because he was in London. What a wonderful, again, it was like this kind of just like life folding in half again as we make the return journey. And I was sharing the story with him and he goes, that Jürgen still continues to eyeball every single line of code. And I was like, that's great, because I could see it brought Jürgen so much joy. And in the sense of true play is safe play, fair play, being good sport. And I think secretly everyone's quite delighted that Jürgen gets to see their line of code, that he's checking the integrity of the whole, and that he's trusted to do that. And again, it's just this working with great people, large brains, but very open minds and very large hearts as well.
That exemplifies something that I found as well, is that everything that doesn't bring me joy, there's someone else that is the thing that most brings them joy. And this is one of the best reasons to get really good at delegating. Because if you hold on to all those things that don't bring you joy because you think you should, or you have a survival rule that says you must, or whatever the other reason is, you are explicitly preventing everyone else from getting the joy that they deserve in their life while you make yourself miserable. So we can make ourselves miserable by holding on to everything that we don't want and also make everyone else miserable because they don't get to do that. Or we can just let go of it, have fun ourselves, and then everyone else gets to have fun too.
Yay.
There's also an extra little piece in there. I find that when you get stuck is when you run out of curiosity. Right? When you're more focused on being out of the situation you're in than experiencing it and finding out why. So you talked about how much you enjoyed, working with other people. You refer to as like debugging other people, and I do catch that you repented of that, but there is that element of what's it like for them, what is it that makes them feel stuck, and choosing, among other things, that I won't take my profluence at their expense. I won't move my agenda by making them stuck, right? And so the idea of serving people is actually helping them where they are. And that requires us to be curious about it, what it's like to be them doing their jobs and to be in their space and faced with their problems. And, how could they make next week better than last week? How can they make next month better than last month, from their point of view? So I think that there's a curiosity and empathy that turns us outward, that actually gives us the strength to start solving problems that affect us in a wider sense. Whereas if, when we're in a tough spot, it's easy to turn inward. And often when we do that, we miss all these great opportunities to collect all these small joys along the way. That's just my point of view.
That sounds altruistic, Tim. I'm selfish, so what do I do? So seriously though,
You
it's
are
like,
not, you liar.
well, I can be, but yeah, when when you're deep in the middle of the profluence, hey, that's the first time I've ever uttered that word. That's awesome. Thank you for that. So it's tough, right? Because you think, am I ever going to get out of this? So yeah, thoughts are going inward. So I love that as a tactic to start saying, you know what, maybe this is an opportunity to go help others. And in turn, I mean, so helping people can just helping others is a great way to start to find little bits of meaning. And I don't want to trivialize something like, oh, what Viktor Frankl said about being in the Holocaust. What was it? It's his man's search for meaning, right? So his quote was something to the effect that you find meaning in the suffering is how you cope with things like this. And so that's kind of what I realize a lot of what I'm doing is when I'm sitting there and doing my little noodling on the phone or guitar or whatever. I am doing a little introversion recharge, but at the same time, I'm also trying to think about, what am I trying to do here? What's going to make me succeed in this long term? And often it's just a lot of little kind of thoughts ultimately go towards things starting to click in my head, at least. So that's the way I work. I'm a little odd, perhaps, but I think just finding the habits that give you the moments where you can back off, do these little mini recharges, overall leads toward a day where it's like I am still happy to get up in the morning and attack it, because there's going to be a lot of interesting things. They're not all going to be great. So 9 to 5 is generally, well, my 7 to 3:30 or whatever is not going to be the best time for me. It's a new job. It's extremely stressful. So yeah, it's one way I'm able to survive those midday hours and then find the real joy in my evenings.
Portia.
Yeah, just in response, thank you, Jeff, to Tim as well. This notion of profluence, experiencing profluence ourselves at the expense of someone else. That reminds me of a concept by one of my teachers. Her name's Sarah Payton. And she writes about resonant empathy, how you learn to resonate with your own instrument and really fine tune what it is that's kind of affecting and entangling you, so that you can kind of emerge and offer whatever you have to offer cleanly. And she talks about tracking your emotional circuits. And one of the circuits that she talks about is predatory aggression. And so, one of the tips I would say is to invite each and every one of us to just notice when we might detect a bit of predatory aggression in ourselves. And what that really means is, my understanding is you end up shifting a little bit too far left in what would be called your instrumental brain, the doing brain, the critical thinking brain, the let's JFDI brain. I'm very exciting to get it done brain and all of that. And because we're so narrow goal focused, we've basically cancelled everything else that's working in our bodies, both the right brain, the heart, and the stomach, the gut. And so we aren't able to be curious anymore. And so we end up predating on someone else, and then we become bigger than them. So it was an insight I had this morning to notice that I'd become this sometimes. Maybe towards a loved one, a little loved one, or maybe a big partner loved one, right? And just recognizing, oh, that's really interesting. Where did that come from? And it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it's me who's responsible for how I am. But yeah, predatory aggression, something to play with in ourselves.
I like that, Portia, that what you said, that we do that to become bigger than someone else. And also when we do that, that we do become bigger than someone else. That's a useful reminder of the impact that can have. So if we're becoming bigger, then we're diminishing them. So now to wrap up, because our time is now short, what have you learned today and what are you taking away to experiment with? And I will start with you, Tim.
Oh, a lot of confirmations, a lot of again, a chance to open up and hear 4 or 5 very different experiences from my own, and to tie them together with what we have in common. I think we have way more that binds us than separates us.
Yes, thank you. Let's go to Melissa next.
Yeah, I think for me, it's similar to Tim. I mean, it is amazing to be a part of this group of folks and to learn what is more similar than different, and to really reflect on some of the stories that have been shared and the ideas that have been shared, and maybe introducing some of those things into my day to day. So maybe we will like play a little bit more, or I do love the whole predatory aggression, and thinking about that a little bit and reminding folks like, hey, this might be where you're heading. So just, yeah, a lot of good ideas shared, and things that I'll definitely reflect on and take back. So
Thank you. Portia.
Yeah, as I was witnessing our time together, the words wisdom circle came up. And this wisdom circle encompasses all your listeners and past speakers and past participants too, without whom we would not be here today, like your previous podcasts. And the thing that we are so strongly united by, I feel, is curiosity. It's like curiosity over ego. And that I was just so struck by that when I heard Tim speak. After many years of playing together on the Agile track and our paths missing last year in Brighton, that, he was just so curious about everything, that it didn't matter about what was currently right or what was currently wrong. And that if only we could explore it together, we'll get to the bottom of it. And then that'll become a new top. And then, and it's just so wonderful to have this curiosity. So I'd love to meet, more curious techies like yourselves and change the world for the better.
Yes, let's do it. Matthew.
A lot of the same. I mean, definitely. So curious. One of the things that I'm very curious about right now is looking at, it's like, oh, predatory aggression. That sounds very, very interesting. And I want to know more about it. Now I want to know what else is in the set. What is around that? What are the other things? And what are the other things that we can identify? And how do they fit with all of this? And so I've, got both curiosity and some joy that I'm going to dive into with that. So that's definitely one thing I'm walking away with. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely great to meet the folks who you haven't met, and some really cool ideas. So I'm definitely digging into the predatory aggression as well. I think the biggest thing I took away, and maybe Tim kicked this all off with talking about actually loving learning, which also hearing the echoes in each of you otherwise, I realize just learning to know when others need the help, to reach out even more, I think comes right back at you in terms of helping solve my issue with feeling this, once again, profluence. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, my grandson had just mentioned something about wanting to learn more on the computer. So we started a series where, hey, he's learning Scratch, and it's actually really cool. Even in 2 lessons, it's amazing to see how much he's able to pick up, which is just very energizing for someone like myself who loves to try to help others or claim to. Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm just going to continue to do more of that and see how much of that feeds back into my excitement about where things can go next.
Thank you. During introductions, I didn't say what most often brings me joy. And one answer is my dog, BB, who has a squeak toy that she will just run around the house with for many minutes. And all I hear is squeak, 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 squeak.
That's the sound of joy,
Delightful
Michael.
yeah.
It really is. And she's just in utter joy. And one of the things that I'm taking away from our lovely conversation today is that joy, resilience, despondency, every emotion we're feeling, and whatever we want to do to shift that to something we more want to feel, it doesn't have to be a whole big production. It can be as easy as 5 seconds of playing the guitar, playing a game, grabbing a squeak toy and running around the house like a maniac.
There's one more small thing I'd like to add, Michael, if I may.
Yes.
It's to refer back to what Melissa talked about her role as CTO, and it is that our love for learning is really a love for people.
Mm. Yeah.
One of the reasons I love working with people is there's always something more to learn.
It's true. Every
Plenty
day.
of surprises.
Yes.
Yeah, otherwise we'll end up finding ourselves answering questions nobody's asking anymore.
Thank you all for a lovely conversation today. And thank you, audience. Portia, Tim, Matthew, Melissa, Jeff, and I would love to know what brings you resilience and joy and helps you connect the two. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.